she mocked. "You're so insecure about my ex, maybe you're not boyfriend material." I stayed silent. The next morning, her bags were waiting on his porch. Some conversations change everything, even when you think you're prepared for them. What I wasn't prepared for was how easily 18 months of what I thought was love could be dismissed with a laugh that felt like ice water in my veins. I'm Trevor, 31, financial analyst at a mid-sized investment firm in Miami. I've always been the type who believes actions speak louder than words, but sometimes words reveal everything you need to know about someone's character. That Tuesday evening in our penthouse, I finally got the truth I'd been avoiding for weeks. Samantha had been coming home later and later from what she called business dinners with potential clients. The thing is, I'd started noticing charges on our shared credit card from restaurants I'd never been to, places like Zuma and Prime 112, the kind of spots where dinner for 2 runs $400 easily. When I brought up the charges during what I thought would be a simple clarification, her response caught me completely off guard. "Those aren't with clients," she said, not even looking up from her phone. "They're with Alex." Alex. Her ex-boyfriend who'd conveniently started a venture capital firm 6 months ago and kept finding reasons to meet with Samantha about potential collaborations. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Why didn't you tell me you were having dinner with your ex?" "Because I knew you'd overreact," she said, finally setting down her phone with this exasperated expression. "It's business, Trevor. Alex is successful now. He has connections I need." "Business dinners that happen 3 nights a week until 1 a.m.? She rolled her eyes. "You're tracking my location now? That's not controlling at all." I pulled out my phone and showed her the credit card statement. "I'm not tracking anything. I'm asking why there are charges for expensive dinners I'm paying for but never attending." That's when her mask completely slipped. "God, you're so insecure about my ex. Maybe you're not boyfriend material if you can't handle me having professional relationships with successful people." The words hit like a physical blow, but it was the laugh that followed that really destroyed something inside me. Not bitter or angry, genuinely amused, like the idea of my concerns was absurd. Like I was some jealous child who couldn't understand adult relationships. I sat there for a long moment, watching her scroll through her phone like she hadn't just gutted our entire relationship with surgical precision. "You're absolutely right," I said quietly. "I'm not boyfriend material for someone who lies about where they spend my money to have dinner with their ex." She looked up then, surprised by my calm tone. "I'm not lying about anything. You told me they were client dinners. That was a lie. You're spending our shared money on romantic dinners with your ex-boyfriend. That's another problem entirely." "They're not romantic, Samantha." I cut her off. 3 nights a week until 1 a.m. at the most expensive restaurants in Miami isn't business. It's dating. She opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to realize she'd been caught. "Fine. Maybe we've been reconnecting. But it's not what you think. What I think is that you've been having an affair and using my credit card to pay for it." Her face flushed red. "It's not an affair. We haven't. We're just talking. Working through some old issues. On my dime. God, everything comes down to money with you. You make decent money, Trevor, but you're not rich. Alex just raised a $50 million fund. He's playing in a different league." And there it was. The real truth underneath all the lies and business dinner excuses. I wasn't successful enough for her anymore. Alex represented the lifestyle she actually wanted, and I was just the guy paying her bills while she figured out how to upgrade. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Miami skyline I'd been so proud to afford when we moved in together. "So this is about money after all." "It's about potential," she said. "Alex has vision. He's building something big. You're content analyzing other people's investments instead of making your own." The casual cruelty of it was almost impressive. 18 months of sharing a life, planning a future, and she'd reduced me to some kind of stepping stone she was ready to discard for better options. I turned back to face her. "You're right about one thing. I'm definitely not boyfriend material." She smiled like she'd won something. Finally, some self-awareness. For someone who lies, cheats, and uses my money to date other men while living in my apartment. The smile faded. That's exactly what this is. And since you've made it clear what you think of me and this relationship, let me make something clear to you. I walked over and sat down across from her, keeping my voice perfectly calm. I'll prove you absolutely right about me not being boyfriend material. Starting tomorrow. Something in my tone must have registered because her confident expression wavered slightly. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're about to find out what Alex's vision for your future actually looks like when you're not living in my apartment and spending my money. I stood up and headed toward the bedroom. Where are you going? To get some sleep. I've got a busy day tomorrow. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, processing the complete destruction of what I'd thought was a solid relationship. But underneath the hurt and anger was something else: relief. The woman I'd been supporting and planning a future with had just revealed exactly who she really was. And tomorrow, I was going to show her exactly who I was in return. While Samantha expected me to spend the weekend groveling and apologizing for my insecurity, I was at Home Depot by 7 a.m. Saturday morning, renting a 16-foot moving truck. I've always been methodical, it's what makes me good at financial analysis, and I approached this situation with the same systematic precision I'd use for a complex portfolio review. The first step was documentation. I spent 2 hours photographing every single item that belonged to Samantha, from her designer handbags lined up in the closet to her collection of rare art books she'd accumulated during her intellectual phase last year. Each photo was time-stamped and geotagged, creating an unshakable record of her belongings in my apartment. Next came the inventory spreadsheet. I created detailed categories: clothing, jewelry, electronics, furniture she'd brought, personal items, and gifts I'd given her that she could reasonably claim ownership of. Each item got a description, estimated value, and condition note. Her Hermes bag collection alone was worth more than my car, but every piece was documented with serial numbers and purchase receipts I found in her meticulously organized files. The most valuable discovery was her laptop, which she'd left open and logged into her email. I didn't snoop through her messages, I didn't need to torture myself with details, but I did notice several emails from Alex discussing our future plans and when you're ready to make the move. The timeline was crystal clear. She'd been planning her exit strategy for weeks, maybe months. What struck me most was how calculating it all was. This wasn't some spontaneous reconnection with an ex. This was a carefully orchestrated transition from one financial situation to a better one, with me as the temporary placeholder while she secured her upgrade. By noon, I had everything sorted, packed, and loaded with military efficiency. The hardest part wasn't the physical labor. It was seeing 18 months of shared life reduced to boxes and bags. The coffee maker we'd picked out together. The throw pillows she'd insisted would make the space feel like home. The framed photos of us from vacations I'd paid for while she promised she'd get the next one. All of it going into boxes like evidence of a relationship that had apparently meant nothing to her. The genius stroke came when I found Alex's address. Samantha had been careless with her mail, and there it was on a bank statement she'd left on the kitchen counter, his new Coral Gables mansion address. According to the property records I pulled up, he'd bought it 8 months ago for $2.8 million. Cash purchase. The same time frame when Samantha started talking about wanting to expand her horizons and network with more successful people. I called a professional moving company, the kind that handles high-end relocations, and arranged for white-glove delivery service with signature confirmation required. The extra $400 for premium service was worth every penny for the professional documentation it provided. The movers would arrive at Alex's house with a detailed manifest, photo documentation, and a receipt showing that all items were carefully packed and transported without damage. I even paid extra for insurance, making sure everything was covered in case Alex tried to claim something was broken or missing. The timing was perfect. I'd researched Alex's neighborhood association meetings online. Apparently he was very active in the Coral Gables Homeowners Association, and scheduled the delivery for exactly when the monthly meeting would be ending. Maximum witness impact as a moving truck pulled up to his pristine driveway with his ex-girlfriend's entire life packed neatly into boxes. By 4 p.m., everything was loaded and ready for delivery. I took final photos of the empty spaces where her belongings had been, documenting the clean handover of her property. My apartment suddenly looked bigger, cleaner, more like the space I'd originally fallen in love with before it became cluttered with someone else's expensive taste and emotional baggage. The moving company called at 6:30 p.m. to confirm successful delivery. "Sir," the gentleman seemed surprised but signed for everything. "We left all boxes in the foyer as requested, and he has the complete inventory list." Perfect. I spent that evening doing something I hadn't done in months. I cooked dinner for myself, opened a bottle of wine I actually liked instead of the expensive stuff Samantha preferred, and watched a documentary about market analysis that she would have called boring. For the first time in weeks, I felt completely relaxed in my own home. Around 9 p.m., my phone started buzzing with increasingly frantic calls from Samantha. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages were exactly what I expected: confusion, then anger, then threats about legal action. "Trevor, what the hell did you do with my stuff? Call me back right now. This is insane. You can't just throw someone's belongings out. I'm calling the police. This is theft." But my favorite was the last one, where her voice cracked slightly. "Please just call me back. We need to talk about this like adults." Like adults. That was rich coming from someone who'd been sneaking around with her ex while using my credit card to pay for their romantic dinners. I poured another glass of wine and started planning my next moves for the week ahead. Sunday morning brought the storm I'd been expecting. Samantha showed up at my building at 8 a.m. with her mother Victoria in tow, both of them looking like they were prepared for war. The doorman called up, and I could hear Samantha's voice in the background demanding to be let up immediately. I told him to send them up. I was curious to see what kind of legal threats they'd prepared overnight. When I opened the door, Victoria pushed past her daughter with the kind of righteous fury that only comes from getting one side of a story. "Trevor, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but this ends now. You cannot steal someone's belongings and dump them at another person's house." I gestured for them to come in, noting how Samantha's eyes immediately went to the spaces where her things used to be. The apartment looked completely different without her clutter: cleaner, more organized, more like a home than a storage unit for expensive impulse purchases. "I didn't steal anything," I said calmly. I carefully packed and professionally delivered all of Samantha's belongings to her new address. "Her new address?" Victoria's voice pitched higher. "She lives here." "Actually, she doesn't." I walked over to my desk and pulled out a folder I'd prepared. According to the lease agreement, only my name appears as the tenant. Samantha has been staying here as my guest for 18 months, but she has no legal tenancy rights. I handed Victoria a copy of the lease. "Feel free to have your lawyer review it." Samantha's face went pale. "Trevor, you know I've been contributing to household expenses." "Have you?" I pulled out another document. These are bank statements showing all rent payments, utility bills, and building fees for the past 18 months. Every single payment came from my account. Your contributions were sporadic grocery purchases and the occasional dinner out that you expensed to our shared credit card. Victoria studied the bank statements with growing concern. "Samantha told me she'd been paying half the rent." "Samantha told you a lot of things that weren't true," I replied. "Just like she told me her dinners with Alex were business meetings with clients." That hit home. Samantha's jaw tightened, but she couldn't argue with documented facts. "You're being vindictive because I hurt your feelings." "I'm being practical because you've been lying for months." I pulled out the final piece of my documentation. "This is particularly interesting, a risk management analysis I do for all major financial decisions." Victoria looked confused. "What kind of analysis?" "I track expenses for shared financial obligations to assess ongoing risk exposure. It's standard practice in my field." I handed her a detailed spreadsheet. "This shows that over the past 6 months, Samantha's financial contributions to our shared expenses dropped to essentially zero, while her personal spending on my credit card increased by 340%. The numbers were devastating. Victoria studied the spreadsheet with the expression of someone watching a house of cards collapse. "Samantha, is this accurate?" "He's making it sound worse than it was." "The data doesn't lie," I said. And here's what's particularly relevant to your legal concerns. Under Florida law, someone who hasn't paid rent or utilities for more than 30 days is considered to have abandoned the property. Samantha hasn't contributed to household expenses in 6 weeks. I could see Victoria processing this information, her lawyer instincts kicking in. What about her personal belongings? Carefully documented, professionally packed, and delivered with full insurance coverage and signature confirmation. I have receipts for everything, including the moving company's itemized manifest. Nothing was damaged, nothing was discarded, and nothing was kept that belonged to her. Samantha finally exploded. This is insane. You can't just decide I don't live here anymore. I didn't decide anything. You decided when you started lying about where you spend your time and my money. You decided when you told me I'm not boyfriend material. You decided when you started planning your future with Alex. I kept my voice perfectly level. I just took you at your word and helped you make the transition more efficiently. Victoria was reading through the lease agreement with professional thoroughness. Samantha, this is a single-person lease. You really don't have any legal standing here. Mom, whose side are you on? I'm on the side of legal reality, Victoria said sharply. And the reality is that Trevor has documentation for everything, while you've been telling me stories that apparently aren't true. The conversation continued for another hour, but the outcome was inevitable. Every angle they tried to attack, tenant rights, property damage, emotional distress, was blocked by my careful documentation and legitimate legal standing. I'd consulted with my company's legal department Friday afternoon, explaining the situation in general terms as a personal risk management issue, and they'd confirmed my position was solid. The final blow came when Victoria asked to see the credit card statements showing the charges I'd mentioned. When she saw the pattern of expensive restaurant bills during times Samantha had told her she was working late or attending networking events, her support completely evaporated. Samantha Marie Thompson, she said with the kind of full-name fury that transcends age, you have been lying to everyone, including me. As they prepared to leave, Samantha made one last attempt at manipulation. Trevor, this isn't you. You're not this cold and calculating. The man I fell in love with would never do something so heartless. I looked at her standing in my doorway, probably for the last time, and felt absolutely nothing except mild curiosity about how she thought emotional manipulation would work after everything she'd done. The man you fell in love with was a financial safety net you could lie to without consequences. That man doesn't exist anymore. Victoria grabbed Samantha's arm and pulled her toward the elevator. Come on. We're done here. And you're going to explain to me exactly how deep this mess goes. After they left, I made coffee and sat on my balcony overlooking Biscayne Bay, watching the boats and feeling lighter than I had in months. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your stuff is in my garage. Come get it or I'm throwing it out. Alex. I smiled and deleted the message. I didn't have any stuff at Alex's house, which meant Samantha was already discovering what her upgraded lifestyle actually looked like when she wasn't living in my apartment rent-free. By Monday morning, Samantha had launched a full-scale social media campaign that would have impressed any digital marketing professional. Her Instagram stories painted a vivid picture of financial abuse and manipulation, complete with tearful selfies and captions about toxic men who use money to control women. The Facebook posts were even more dramatic, describing how her controlling ex-boyfriend had stolen her belongings while she was at work and dumped them like garbage at a random address. But the TikTok videos were her masterpiece, short, emotional clips about escaping financial abuse, with trending hashtags and carefully edited tears that went viral in Miami's influencer circles within hours. I discovered the extent of her campaign when my phone started buzzing with concerned messages from mutual friends. Brad and Jessica, a couple we'd double-dated with regularly, were the first to reach out. Dude, what's going on? Samantha's posting some serious stuff about you, Brad texted. She says you locked her out and threw away her things. Within an hour, I had similar messages from 6 other people in our social circle. Samantha had clearly coordinated this campaign, probably spending Sunday night crafting her victim narrative while staying at Alex's mansion. The posts were getting significant engagement too, dozens of comments from her followers expressing outrage and support, sharing their own stories of financial abuse, and calling me everything from a narcissist to a sociopath. I'll admit, for about 10 minutes, I felt a flash of panic. Social media can destroy reputations and careers, especially in a city like Miami where image matters almost as much as actual performance. But then my analytical training kicked in, and I realized Samantha had made a critical error. She'd chosen emotional manipulation over factual accuracy, and I had 18 months of documented evidence to counter every single claim. My strategy was simple: selective disclosure to key influencers in our mutual friend network. I started with Brad and Jessica since they were respected in our social circle and had always seemed like genuinely decent people. I invited them for coffee Tuesday evening and brought my documentation folder. I want you to see the actual facts before this gets completely out of hand, I told them, spreading out the credit card statements on the table. These are the charges she's calling financial abuse. Jessica's expression changed as she studied the restaurant bills. Trevor, these are all from places you hate. You complained about how pretentious Prime 112 was when we suggested it for my birthday. Because I was never there, I said. Samantha was using our shared credit card to take Alex to expensive dinners while telling me she was working late. I showed them the timeline, how the charges aligned perfectly with nights she claimed to be at client meetings or networking events. Brad shook his head slowly. She was cheating and using your money to pay for dates? For months. And when I confronted her, she told me I wasn't boyfriend material and that Alex was more successful. I pulled out my phone and showed them screenshots of her own text messages from the week before, where she'd admitted to reconnecting with Alex and complained about my small-minded approach to money. Jessica was reading through the moving company receipts with growing amazement. You hired professional movers? With insurance and documentation? I wanted to make sure everything was handled properly. Nothing was damaged, nothing was stolen, and she got every single item that belonged to her. The evidence was overwhelming. By the end of our conversation, Brad and Jessica were completely convinced that Samantha's social media narrative was fabricated. More importantly, they volunteered to share the real story with other people in our circle who'd been taken in by her victim performance. The domino effect was swift and devastating. Within 48 hours, Samantha's support network began crumbling as the documented evidence spread through our mutual friends. Her carefully crafted victim narrative fell apart when people saw the actual credit card statements and realized she'd been lying about basic facts. The turning point came when someone shared her TikTok in a local Miami group chat that included several people who knew both of us. The comments section, which had initially been full of support and outrage on her behalf, gradually shifted as people began questioning inconsistencies in her story. Wait, if he threw away your stuff, why are you posting from Alex's house? One comment asked. If he was financially controlling, how were you able to afford designer bags on a marketing salary? Asked another. The most damaging comment came from someone who'd apparently seen the professional moving truck at Alex's neighborhood. I live in Coral Gables and saw a white glove moving service deliver like 50 boxes to that address. That's not how you dump someone's stuff like garbage. By Thursday, several of her posts had been deleted, and the ones that remained had comment sections full of people calling out the inconsistencies in her story. Her follower count dropped by nearly 300 people in 3 days, and brands that had been sending her free products for promotional posts suddenly went quiet. I never posted anything myself or directly responded to her accusations. I didn't need to. The truth was more powerful than any narrative she could construct, and letting the evidence speak for itself was far more effective than getting into a public argument that would just generate more drama. The final nail in the coffin of her social media campaign came from an unexpected source, Alex himself. Apparently tired of having moving boxes cluttering his foyer and dealing with questions from neighbors about the situation, he posted a single Instagram story showing the neatly stacked boxes with the caption, "When your ex's ex handles breakups more professionally than most businesses handle deliveries." It was subtle, but the implication was clear. Even Alex recognized that I'd been more than fair in how I'd handled the situation. Within hours, that story had been screenshot and shared throughout Miami's social media scene, effectively ending Samantha's attempt to paint herself as a victim. The following Tuesday, My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize but a voice I knew all too well. Victoria, Samantha's mother, and apparently the family's designated crisis manager. Her tone was completely different from our confrontational meeting the week before. Now she sounded like a concerned grandmother calling about a lost family treasure. "Trevor, I hope you don't mind me calling directly. I know things ended badly between you and Samantha, but I'm hoping you can help us with something important." I leaned back in my office chair, curious about what new angle they'd developed. "What can I do for you, Victoria?" "It's about Samantha's grandmother's engagement ring. It's been in our family for 4 generations, absolutely irreplaceable. Samantha thinks she might have left it in your bedroom safe during all the chaos of moving out. Would it be possible for us to come by and check? Just for a few minutes." The story was compelling. A priceless family heirloom, generations of sentimental value, an innocent oversight during an emotional time. If I hadn't spent the past week documenting every detail of this situation, I might have felt sympathetic. Instead, I felt curious about what they were really after. "That's strange," I said. "I remember Samantha being very careful about her jewelry when she packed. Let me check something and call you back." After hanging up, I did what any good analyst does when presented with suspicious information. I investigated. My apartment's security system archives footage for 90 days, and I'd never bothered to review the recordings from the day Samantha collected her personal items before our final confrontation. What I found was better than any Hollywood thriller. The footage from that Thursday afternoon showed Samantha systematically going through my bedroom, spending nearly an hour photographing documents from my desk drawer, including bank statements, investment portfolios, and work-related financial analyses. But the most interesting part came at timestamp 3:47 p.m., when she was clearly visible packing her jewelry box. I watched her hold up a diamond ring, examine it in the light, then carefully place it in a small velvet pouch before putting it in her purse. The ring was definitely with her when she left, and she was on the phone during the entire packing process, apparently discussing strategy with someone off camera. "Make sure you get photos of everything," I could hear her saying to whoever was on the call. "We might need them later." The phone conversation was the smoking gun that revealed this wasn't a distraught girlfriend grabbing her belongings. This was a calculated intelligence-gathering operation. She'd been photographing my personal financial information, probably planning to use it in some kind of legal or social media campaign if I tried to fight the breakup. When I called Victoria back, I kept my tone friendly and helpful. "Good news about the ring. I found it on the security footage. Samantha definitely has it." "Are you sure?" "She's been frantically looking everywhere." "Absolutely positive. She packed it very carefully on Thursday afternoon around 3:45 p.m. I can see her putting it in a small velvet pouch and placing it in her purse. Would you like me to email you the footage?" The silence on the other end stretched for almost 30 seconds. "Oh," Victoria finally said, her voice noticeably flatter. "Well, perhaps she misplaced it after leaving your apartment." "That's certainly possible. But the footage also shows her photographing my personal documents and bank statements while she was packing. You might want to ask her about that too." Another long pause. Photographing documents? Bank statements, investment accounts, work papers. She spent quite a bit of time documenting my financial information while talking to someone on the phone about getting photos of everything for later use. I heard Victoria take a sharp breath. "Trevor, I had no idea." "I figured you didn't. The footage makes it pretty clear this wasn't just an emotional breakup for her. It was a strategic operation. She was gathering intelligence, probably planning to use my financial information if I'd tried to fight her decision to leave." When Victoria spoke again, her voice had completely changed. Gone was the concerned grandmother. In its place was a lawyer who just realized her client had been lying about everything. "I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually. You were just protecting your daughter based on the information she gave you. I understand that. What she told me about the situation was incomplete. Victoria, your daughter photographed my personal financial documents without permission while pretending to pack her belongings. That's potential identity theft. She then tried to manipulate you into helping her gain access to my apartment under false pretenses to look for a ring she definitely took with her. I have everything documented and archived." The final silence lasted almost a minute. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "We won't be contacting you again." After that call, I never heard from Victoria again. No more legal threats, no more demands for access to my apartment, no more family heirloom emergencies. The security footage had revealed not just Samantha's deception, but the calculated nature of her entire approach to our breakup. She hadn't just been planning to leave me for Alex, she'd been preparing for war, gathering ammunition to use if I'd tried to fight for our relationship or expose her lies. The irony was perfect. Her attempt to gain one final advantage had backfired completely, revealing the true scope of her manipulation and destroying any remaining sympathy her family might have had for her situation. 3 weeks later, I was reviewing quarterly compliance reports when my phone rang with a call that made my blood run cold. It was David Chin, my company's chief compliance officer, and his tone immediately told me this wasn't a routine check-in. "Trevor, I need you in my office immediately. We have a serious situation involving potential securities violations." My stomach dropped as I walked to the executive floor. In my field, compliance issues can end careers permanently, and I couldn't imagine what might have triggered an investigation. David's office was stark and professional, with the kind of atmosphere that made even innocent people feel guilty. "Sit down," he said, closing the door behind me. "We've received information suggesting that confidential client analysis reports from your portfolio may have been shared with unauthorized third parties." I felt the world tilt slightly. What kind of information? Anonymous tip came through our ethics hotline yesterday. Someone claimed you've been sharing proprietary investment research with individuals outside the firm. He pulled out a folder thick with documents. The caller specifically mentioned reports on 3 companies that Alex Rodriguez's venture capital firm invested heavily in over the past 6 months. Companies that coincidentally align perfectly with recommendations from your internal research. The pieces clicked together with devastating clarity. Samantha had photographed my work documents during her intelligence gathering operation, and somehow that information had made its way to Alex's firm. The timeline was damning. Alex's most successful recent investments perfectly matched my confidential analysis reports that I'd been working on during the final months of my relationship with Samantha. "David, I never shared any confidential information with anyone outside the firm. Someone had unauthorized access to my personal workspace, but I can prove exactly how it happened." I spent the next hour walking him through the security footage, the documented timeline of Samantha's deception, and the clear evidence that she'd photographed my work materials without my knowledge or consent. I showed him the timestamps proving the photos were taken weeks before Alex's firm made their corresponding investments. David studied everything with the methodical precision of someone whose job depends on getting facts exactly right. "This is actually worse than simple information sharing," he finally said. "If your ex-girlfriend was feeding insider information to her new boyfriend's investment firm, we're looking at potential SEC violations that could result in criminal charges." The investigation took 2 weeks, but the compliance team's findings were conclusive. My computer access logs, email records, and document management history proved I'd never transmitted any information externally. Meanwhile, the security footage clearly showed Samantha photographing specific reports that Alex's firm had later acted upon with suspicious timing and accuracy. "Trevor, you're completely cleared of any wrongdoing," David told me during our final meeting. "In fact, you're potentially the victim of corporate espionage. We're filing a formal report with the SEC, and there may be criminal referrals for both Samantha Thompson and Alex Rodriguez." The SEC investigation moved quickly once they had the documented evidence. Financial regulators don't mess around with insider trading, especially when there's clear proof of information theft and systematic exploitation. Within a month, both Samantha and Alex were facing federal charges for securities fraud, conspiracy, and violation of insider trading laws. The irony was devastating. Samantha's plan to upgrade to a wealthier, more successful boyfriend had led both of them into a federal investigation that could result in prison time and permanent bans from the financial industry. Alex's venture capital firm was frozen pending investigation, his assets were under government review, and his reputation in Miami's business community was completely destroyed. For me, the situation actually enhanced my professional standing. My company's leadership praised my documentation and cooperation with the investigation, and word spread through Miami's financial community about how I'd handled both the personal betrayal and the professional ethics violation. Several headhunters reached out about senior positions at larger firms, impressed by my integrity under pressure. The final twist came when the investigation revealed that Samantha and Alex's relationship had been strategically planned from the beginning. Text messages recovered from Alex's phone showed they'd been plotting to extract information from me for over 4 months, using their rekindled romance as cover for corporate espionage. What I'd thought was a simple case of my girlfriend cheating with her ex was actually an elaborate financial crime conspiracy that could send both of them to federal prison. 3 months later, Alex called with exhaustion in his voice. "Trevor, I need you to know that Samantha orchestrated everything. The rekindled romance, the timing, extracting information from you, it was all calculated." He paused. "She tried to move in with me after you kicked her out, but then started doing to me exactly what she'd done to you. Worse, she was stealing my client information and trying to sell it to competitors. The parallel was perfect. She's moved on to Marcus Webb now, same playbook. I tried to warn him, but he thinks I'm just jealous." Alex's cooperation with federal investigators revealed Samantha had been running similar schemes against multiple men in Miami's financial sector. 6 months later, she was arrested for securities fraud and conspiracy charges. Alex's firm was shut down, but my methodical documentation had actually protected both of us during the investigation. I'd been promoted to senior portfolio manager, and my systematic approach had become legendary in our compliance training. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting bad choices catch up naturally.